address this gathering this morning. As Richard said, I am Charles Budd. I am the district court judge presiding in the Penobscot Adult Drug Treatment Court. I have been a district court judge since February 2016, when I was elevated to the bench from private practice. And since June of 2017, I have been formally presiding in the Adult Drug Treatment Court in Penobscot. I came into that position almost through happenstance back in the days when we were able to still go out and enjoy social activities in public gatherings. I was out one evening in March of 2017 at the Penobscot Theater watching a play. And during the intermission, I ran into one of my judicial colleagues in the lobby. And in exchanging small talk with him, he indicated he was there with the Penobscot Adult Drug Treatment Court group that night watching a play called Papermaker. And I mentioned almost sort of in passing to him that I would be interested in trying that someday. Yeah, I believed in the mission. I was interested in what the courts are attempting to do. Now that I had just about a year of judicial experience under my belt, maybe I could someday aspire to perhaps expand into that area. This was on a Friday evening, and the following Monday, I got a call from the chief of the district court thanking me for volunteering to take over the Penobscot Adult Drug Treatment Court, which I was happy to do. And in full disclosure, the judge who was then presiding was a judge named Everett Fowle, who was also presiding in Augusta and in Portland, in addition to the Bangor court, and so was really kind of running himself ragged trying to manage all of those courts. So I was happy to take on the role. I've been doing it formally since June 2017. I was able to watch Judge Fowle preside for the 3 months that fell between March and June of 2017 and get a sense of how the court worked, how he managed the court, and all the things I would need to try and concentrate on doing myself once I was in the role without training wheels anymore, so to speak. Richard identified the various components, the team members who make up the team, who come from different professional backgrounds and different professional worlds. And it took me a while to become comfortable with the notion that these folks wear multiple hats. So we have a prosecutor, for example. We have a Bangor police officer on our team. We have a probation officer. And it is their job not simply to carry out their professional missions, but to provide additional three-dimensional perspective on the population, what makes it high risk, high need, what would likely be the benefit of our program to folks who are seeking admission to it. In addition to that, we have more traditional, I guess, treatment / counseling / case management professionals on the team who you would expect, or who I would have expected to have more of a grasp on from a professional perspective on who we're looking for, what our mission is, how we're trying to help these folks. And so we do have case management, from whom you'll hear later, and I'll try not to steal her thunder. We have as well multiple professional treatment providers who interact with the team and provide their professional perspectives. And so it became clear to me that this was a team that had multiple layers, multiple folks wearing different hats, and really allowed me to become comfortable with my role much more quickly than I would have expected, because everyone on my team is so thoroughly professional and comfortable and invested in the court that it didn't take me very long at all to come to understand that I could rely on their advice. And we do have some spirited discussions among the group, as you might imagine, but we usually are able to come to a consensus, or at least a decision that everyone finds acceptable. And I am always able to be comfortable that the advice I've gotten is careful, is thorough, is thoughtful, and is frank and candid as well. As for the participants, Richard identified the formal process through which participants in the court first apply to become participants of court. There is the application that is filled out, and then there's an evaluation that takes place. And again, I don't want to speak or steal thunder from Darcy, and also from Ms. Mckay, who is going to be speaking to you later as a former participant in my court. But we vet the candidates, we discuss them in a lively, candid setting outside of court. We have a team meeting which takes place before court. every time that we're getting together. And the first thing we do at the team meeting is look at the new applications to our court. Our capacity right now is 25. We have, in my court, we have some fluidity. We have somewhere between 23 and 27 participants right now, depending upon how you consider or define people who are about to graduate. We have 3 people who will be graduating in our next session. We also have a couple of people who have recently been inducted and a couple more who are scheduled to be inducted off of the participant application list. So we're right around our capacity. It's a little bit fluid with people graduating, people applying to be taken into the program. Every once in a while, unfortunately, someone is terminated from the program. We had that happen this week as well, and that's an unfortunate circumstance that also lends some fluidity to the numbers in the program. But 25 is generally considered our capacity, and we have been in Penobscot County right around that for the time I've been presiding. Once someone has applied and has been admitted into the program, that person will be scheduled for an induction, which is a hybrid process between a formal court proceeding at which the person typically comes in and pleads guilty to whatever the new offense is that launched the application in the first place, or much more commonly actually comes in under a motion to revoke his or her probation, having previously been convicted and placed on probation, and now facing a motion or multiple motions to revoke probation. So there is a formal in-court, the entire event takes place in court, which of course means something different now than it did prior to COVID-19, but it is a formal on the record in-court proceeding at which the individual either pleads guilty, has a dialogue with the judge about understanding the rights and the crime with which he or she has been accused, and the rights that apply throughout the process, and the willingness to give up those rights and instead plead guilty. And the standard dialogue that takes place then, or in the case of motion to revoke probation, the person admits that he or she has violated their probation, understands again the right to have a hearing in that, and is willing to give that hearing up. And so that's the more formal nuts and bolts procedural step that takes place. And then we turn, after the person has completed that process, to a review of the contract that the individual signs upon entering the adult drug treatment court, which is a 36 paragraph, multiple page document that identifies all of the additional layers of rules, requirements, restrictions, obligations that are placed on people coming into the drug court. It is identified as a contract. Not every one of the 36 items specifically applies to every individual. For example, there is one item that simply says other with a blank space next to it. There are certain items referring to where people are, addresses at which people are required to live, or people with whom they're not allowed to have contact. But then there are generally applicable rules about showing up, as Richard said, for meetings, being honest, answering questions, showing up for interactions with your treatment providers and with case management, responding when you are supposed to respond to telephone calls or other messages, being home at a certain time, avoiding people who are going to be problematic for you. Really an additional stricter layer of rule making, of guidance that's placed on the participants than would otherwise be part of their probation setting if they're already on probation. And in fact, their probation is typically amended to require them to follow their adult drug treatment court contract. And so not doing something they're told to do because the team has told them to do it could potentially become a violation of their probation. And so the people are inducted. We, as I said, we gather before court. My court meets every other Wednesday, and so we gather in the morning as a team. And again, the word gather means something different now than it did prior to COVID. So we generally get together through the Zoom platform here, and we have our team meeting, which we consider new applicants, talk about whether people are appropriate to be admitted to court. This is a situation in which you have to consider the best practice, which indicates someone who is designated as high risk and high need should be admitted to drug court, but there are also additional considerations having to do with whether the individuals are charged with a violent crime or have a violent history, whether they have been charged with a drug offense that involves some measure of trafficking, and trafficking for profit rather than for personal use, and whether introducing someone like that whether a violent person or a drug trafficker, into the court will put other participants at risk. So those discussions take place. And then we turn to a review of the current participants and one by one discuss how they are doing, who is doing well, who is not doing well, what needs to be addressed individually with each of the participants when we get to the court session later that day. Things that are going well, we try to highlight so that we can be sure to mention them and provide encouragement, and in particularly outstanding circumstances, even material rewards here and there, typically gift cards or relaxed curfews or privileges to do things that you would not otherwise be permitted to do based on your phase in the program, and those sorts of things. People who are not doing well, we talk about how to present the information to them, how to interact and engage to try and find out what is going on that's causing them to struggle and what might be done differently. And so the staffing, and my team has gotten better at it. When I first started doing this, the staffing meetings would take several hours, and Richard, in his very gentle yet firm way, encouraged me that there is a more efficient approach to this, and I think I've gotten better at it recently in terms of trying to cut down the amount of time that we spend talking about things that really can be kind of summarized in a memorandum to the team before we get started. So that is an area in which I will continue to try and work, but with Richard's gentle guidance, I think I'm getting better at it. We then turn to the actual court sessions, and those include individual engagements with each of the participants. During the COVID era, we have typically had all of our participants come to each meeting. Prior to that, we had arrived at a structure under which those who were in the more advanced phases would only have to come to every other meeting. So if you were in a phase 5 or in a phase 4 situation, you would only have to come once a month rather than usually twice a month. And if you were in the lower phases, you would come every time. But since we've been in COVID, we have typically had everybody come to every meeting, largely because it seemed to make sense to us that everybody, whether a drug court participant or any other citizen, was likely to be feeling very isolated when we were all locked down and looking around last March and April and May and trying to figure out what was safe to do outdoors and how close you could get to people. We figured it would be helpful to have everybody there just to try and overcome the sense of isolation. And so we've continued that going forward here. We're trying gradually to get back into a situation in which we have people in court in person, and there are some events which are able to take place in person. We have had a discussion, in fact, this week about whether the graduations that will take place in the middle of April can happen in person. There's simply, I think, when you're especially recognizing an event like a graduation, there is just a more immediate sense of the pride and the accomplishment and the satisfaction when you happen to be in person rather than arrayed on a screen with 30 or 40 or 50 people in the squares that appear around a Zoom session. And sometimes you see them clap and sometimes you don't when applause is warranted. But when you're in person, there's no mistaking the applause and the outpouring of support that comes during a graduation. But as Richard said, it's my goal to interact with each participant for at least 3 minutes every session. Some of our participants, you'll hear from one of our former participants, one of our really stars, in a few minutes here, and she'll be able to tell you much more effectively than I can what it's like to try and interact. It's easy to sit there and be the judge and command someone's attention, and perhaps not quite so easy to be at the other end of that discussion. So I'll let Katie address that when she has her turn, but it is my objective to try and speak at least for 3 minutes with every person. Some folks in our group are extremely gregarious and talkative and have quite a bit to say, whether they're doing well or whether they're not doing well, or whether they've had just a typical week. And so I often find myself spending 7 or 8 minutes with those folks. There are other folks who have very little to say, again, whether they're doing well or not doing well. And so it becomes a little bit more of a challenge to try and keep someone on the floor, so to speak, for at least 3 minutes. One of our folks who is going to be graduating soon is one of the least talkative people I've encountered in drug court, and it really has been kind of difficult to get him to really say a whole lot. I guess he's shy and also just kind of modest, but I had the enormously satisfying experience of reading his aftercare plan. When people are on the cusp of graduation, they submit an aftercare plan that's many pages in length and asks a lot of questions about the plans for the future, where people have been, where they've come from, what they've experienced, where they have felt growth, where they need to perhaps feel or find more growth, how they plan to wrap themselves in support when the drug court team isn't there. And this gentleman who had a hard time kind of stringing 3 words together wrote one of the most thorough, well thought out, careful aftercare plans that I've encountered. And it was just it was gratifying for me to see that this fellow who didn't have a whole lot to say throughout the 15 or 18 months he'd been in the program he really had been internalizing all this and taking it all in, and it meant something to him, and it seems to have profoundly affected the way he looks at himself, looks at his life, looks at his opportunities and potential going forward. So that was gratifying. And we also use the individual actions or interactions to pass out sanctions and rewards. As Richard showed you, the chart that we use, which kind of looks like one of those play sheets that NFL offensive coordinators hold up over their faces whenever they're calling in plays from the sideline. It really is very intricate, and it really is very objective too. So it's important to make it clear to folks when they're receiving rewards, and especially when they're receiving sanctions, that this is a process that is thoroughly objective, starting with the person's phase or stage in the program, the seriousness of the violation, and they are broken down into 16 or 18 different potential violations, and then the sanctions that would appropriately apply based upon a grid that features the phase in the program and the seriousness of the violation. As you might imagine, the participants are very aware of what happens to them and what happens to their peers. And so it's important to me to make it as clear as I can to them that the discipline that is handed out is objective, because you often find situations where people will say, well, so-and-so did this and I did the same thing and different results happened. And so we do try to impress upon them that it is an objective analysis. I also invite case management and my treatment professionals to let me know while the participants on the floor what has happened, how things are going, whether things are going well or whether they're not going well. I typically invite the participant himself or herself to tell me something that he or she has learned that's helped him or her maintain his sobriety or her sobriety. And quite often you'll hear, as we go through the day, people we start with the more senior, more advanced participants and work our way down to the newest ones. And you'll hear people say things who are more advanced or further along in the program. This is how I used to think, this is how I used to act. And let me just try to impress upon you folks who are newer in the program, the sooner you understand this or become comfortable with this, for example, you'll frequently hear that you need to be honest. You need to understand that the team is not here to get you, to punish you, to harm you, but to really support you. And the sooner you understand those sorts of things, the better off you'll be. And of course, it's obviously, or I would think obviously, easier to be someone who is doing well, repeating that back to someone who is early in the program. But everybody who makes it to phase 5 was in phase 1 at some point. And for me, the most valuable moments, or among the most valuable moments, are when my senior participants say things to my newer participants that essentially boil down to, I was in your shoes, I felt the same way you do. I was distrustful, I was angry, I was hurt. And here I am, and you can have good things in your life. Here are the things I have in my life now, and you can have those things too. That's every bit as effective, in my view, as a judge sitting up on high, so to speak, and making statements to participants that they are required to listen to. And I try and make it clear to them, I understand that it is court. They are required to behave a certain way. They are required to be courteous and respectful. They're required to show up. I have the ability to sanction them. I have the ability, among other things, to impose jail sanctions on them if things happen that are severe enough. More often, or much more often, it's something like a curfew restriction or community service assignment. Every once in a while, I have somebody write an essay about something. Jail is really kind of a last resort, but that is an authority that I have. So it is more effective, in my view, or as effective in my view, to have the senior participants themselves say, I've been in your shoes. It took me a while to get this. And let me just tell you, it works, or it worked for me, and you can have good things in your life. Along those lines, and I don't want to go too much longer because I'm taking up more time than I really have been allotted here. Maybe the final thing I'll say is that the difference between being a judge in quote unquote regular court with all of the necessary procedure, formality, separation, if you will, between litigants, attorneys, and the judge, and being a judge in drug court is that I find that I am not exclusively a neutral participant when I am presiding over the drug court in the way that I am the neutral arbiter, so to speak, the decision maker, the fact finder in regular court. When I am the judge in the drug court, I take on an additional element that is something of partisan or an advocate. It is my job to try and encourage folks when they are doing well, to let them know when they are doing well that I know they're doing well, and to tell them that I'm proud of them. There are moments that are enormously rewarding and gratifying in the role I serve as drug court judge, and you'll hear about one of my prouder participants. You'll hear from her in a few minutes here. There are many of whom I'm proud. And Katie graduated with a cohort that were all very strong, and we've missed them enormously. And there are moments of really unbearable sadness that come up in drug court as well. And really, the final thing I'll say is that as a judge in the drug court, you kind of wear those moments of pride, of being gratified and pleased for what is happening to the participants. And then you also are aware of the moments of sadness. And so there's a bit more of a blending into the role of an advocate or even partisan as a drug court judge that does not exist in a regular court setting. So with that, I will sign off. My apologies to everybody else for taking more time than I was allotted. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Your Honor. And before I introduce Darcy, I did want to point out that there is another treatment court in the state of Maine, although not part of the state of Maine's judicial system. The Penobscot Nation has a tribal healing to wellness court for adults and juveniles on Indian Island that is open for all Indigenous peoples residing in Maine. And thank you, Brianna, for pointing that out. I did not mean to leave that out. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Darcy Wilcox, who will give us a brief recap of the case management services.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, everyone, for allowing us to be here. And thank you, Judge Budd. I think you did an amazing job really highlighting all the major and most important parts about the drug court. So thank you. And you definitely have allowed for me to speak less. So thank you again. So Maine Pretrial Services, who I work for, has the privilege really to provide case management services to all of the recovery courts and drug courts in Maine. And we've been doing this for almost a couple of decades now, so it is truly a privilege. We provide comprehensive court case management and drug and alcohol testing in these courts. And the first step in our process is to act on referrals as they come to the court. And we do this by conducting psychosocial assessments and objective risk need assessments so that we can purposely determine and target the population of who meet the high risk, high need criteria. And as Richard mentioned earlier, these are folks who are at high risk to recidivate and have high needs in terms of substance use disorders or co-occurring disorders, including mental health disorders. So we conduct these assessments very early on in their brief. We also utilize treatment resources that you'll hear about after. We use all of these assessments to determine if they're appropriate for this court. And we also go through a verification process where case managers are independently verifying through third parties the housing situation that the individual is proposing. We're looking to see if it's a safe and stable environment for them and what kind of housing resources might be needed if they were to get into the court, We are reaching out to talk with employers if it's appropriate. It's not always required. Treatment providers, most importantly, if they're connected, to understand where the individual really is in their situation before they enter the court. We take all of this information combined with the treatment assessments, and we report out to the team. We make a presentation to all of the team members about all the information that we've gathered about the individual. At that point in time, a decision is usually made. And if not, we're determining other action steps that we might need to take on the case that might be barriers for them to be admitted. Once an individual is accepted into the court, we provide comprehensive case management services, which really includes a lot. We conduct further assessments that are, again, looking at housing and making sure that we are giving linkages or performing linkages to other housing resources in the community so that we can create that stable, safe housing resource for them. A lot of our folks utilize local shelters, local sober and recovery houses. Those are so important for our folks. And really during COVID, we've been experiencing a lack of available, affordable, stable, sober housing for our individuals. So that has been a real challenge for us recently, but it has been an ongoing problem over the years. So we regularly collaborate with other treatment organizations and resource organizations in the community. Drug court has the ability to contract, the state contracts with local treatment providers to provide substance use disorder treatment and sometimes MAT services and mental health services. But we also, if those contracted agencies are unable to provide a service, we will go out into the community and make those linkages. And that really gives us the ability to engage our individuals, our participants in wraparound services, which really does help support them to move forward in the program. We also perform regular, frequent, random, and observed drug and alcohol testing. And we're real excited because we just got back into most of our offices. Some of our offices were slowly reopening in the last couple of months. And so we are in-person testing in most of our locations. So we're really excited about that. Those are urine tests that are done in person. Like I said, they are observed, and we follow national best practice standards in our policies and procedures in terms of drug testing. We meet with the participants regularly, but at a minimum, at least once per week, so we can discuss what their treatment goals are, what their personal case goals are, what requirements they have to achieve to move forward through the FACE system. We also report out in writing to our team. We produce court reports for the team to review in staffing, as Judge Budd had mentioned, and this is documentation of all the progress made or lack thereof in the last 2 weeks. But these staffing reports have a wealth of information on them that really aids the team in what they need to make decisions. We report out also to our team in real time. We use the motto, drug court is not business as usual, and so everything has to happen in real time. So if we're not having contact with an individual and we're supposed to, we need to make sure that we mitigate any kind of risk factors that come up in the moment. We also interface with local law enforcement and probation and the jail and really all the stakeholders that we need to in order to provide that comprehensive case management and all of those linkages. And most importantly, I think because I'm a data nerd, we collect data. And that data over the last couple of decades has afforded us the ability to have evaluations and to prove that what we're doing, which I think is so important, that what we're doing is working, and maybe things that we still need to work on. So that is probably a task that's an annoyance for our staff, but it is necessary. And they are constantly collecting information. I didn't want to talk very much, so I'm going to wrap up there. But thank you again for giving us the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much, Darcy. And now we move on to Abby. Thank you, Abby.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for your presentation, Richard and Judge Bud and Darcy for sharing. And hello, everyone. My name is Abby Fruchi, and thank you for having me be part of the panel discussion on treatment and recovery courts in Maine today. I'd like to start by sharing that my perspective of treatment courts comes from a variety of experiences. So first and foremost, I became acquainted with treatment courts in 2005 when I was a criminal defendant. I'm also speaking to you as a substance use treatment provider who has worked in the Washington County Adult Drug Treatment Court program, providing direct services to clients. My own experiences with substance use disorder and engagement in the criminal justice system really inspired me to want to pursue a career helping others, because I recognize it was not for lack of want or willingness that our community members get caught in the grips of substance use disorder. What I know through my own experience is that it's often fear, guilt, shame, lack of knowledge and resources, and the spiral that comes from the grips of addiction. When an individual engages in treatment court, a licensed treatment provider conducts screening, assessment, and referrals for all participants. And you heard Judge Bud and Darcy speak a bit to this. Evidence-based individual and group services are utilized to support participants in gaining knowledge, skills, and concepts to support their recovery journeys. We utilize evidence-based treatment, so medication for opioid use disorder and other substance use disorder is certainly one of those. Referrals to mental health and other identified treatment services are utilized as well to support the treatment needs of each of the participants. So while there are universal treatment services, there's also individualized treatment services to really meet each of the participants' need. As we know from the name, treatment is the foundation of treatment and recovery courts. It's just an essential component to it. My experience, personal experience in treatment was just pivotal in transforming my recovery. It was the first time in my life I was learning about my problem rather than that I was the problem. So it really compelled me in my life and my recovery journey. Throughout my time as a treatment provider, I have watched our criminal justice system advance, moving into areas that have been new for judges and judicial staff. The courtrooms have turned into places of compassion and care. We've seen celebrations, as Judge Bud had talked about, where family could attend. There might be clapping and handshakes. And while some may say, why is this important? I have to tell you, as a person who has often been on the outskirts of many groups, particularly in the criminal justice system, engaging in such a humanistic way and building relationships is one of the key components and really one of the most fundamental pieces of healing from substance use disorder. As we continue to battle opioid and substance use disorder across our state, we're learning what works, what doesn't, and where we need to grow. And that's why Maine Treatment Courts just underwent a year-long evaluation with recommendations on how we can continue to advance in our work. Maine Treatment Courts have certainly been adapting to the growing needs and utilize evidence-based practices and standards of best care, as we've talked about today. As a treatment court graduate, being able to now sit alongside the judge as a colleague, it really speaks to the impact that the treatment court system has had on transforming my life. Sometimes we don't always see, whether as a treatment provider, a judge, a case manager, we don't always know or don't always see the impact we have. And sometimes we have to accept that our impact is really planting the seed, but we don't always get to watch it grow. When we have treatment court participants that do not complete the program, we can feel as though our work was not done. But it is so important, no matter what, whether you're working in treatment courts or any other kind of field that is supporting community members in substance use, it's important that we recognize that every engagement, every resource, every bit of information that is provided is really planting that seed. Lastly, I'm speaking to you today as the first treatment court graduate to sit on the board of directors for the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. I am honored and humbled to have been appointed to this position. But again, it's not about me. This is about us, treatment court participants. This is about participants having a voice that can radiate and change systems. As professionals, we are listening and learning from those who are experiencing the challenges, We're learning what works and we're learning what is needed. As professionals, we sit in a seat of power and authority, but we recognize that the participant is truly the expert in their own life. As we look to the future of treatment courts and look to the future of recovery across the state of Maine, we see that peer engagement and peer involvement is an essential component to supporting our programs. We have seen peers being embedded in so many different programs and systems, sectors across our state that support those impacted by substance use disorders. And treatment courts are no different. Peers are an essential component. So if you're sitting here today watching this webinar and you're a person in recovery, a participant or a graduate of a treatment court program, I hope you know and understand the impact that you can have on others. You are truly the most important person at the table. I look forward to the growth and expansion of peers within our treatment and recovery court programs because the stories that they have and the perspective that they can share is absolutely profound, and we'll hear Katie's in just a few minutes. Treatment courts play a vital role in so many ways, helping to support the development of a personal sense of being, strengthening family and social relationships, and creating opportunities to be a service to the community. Treatment courts are alternatives to incarceration, but I will also say they are so much more, as we've heard today. It's not just about keeping an individual out of jail or prison. It is about helping that individual, that family, that son or daughter really strive to reach their fullest potential. Best practices, evidence-based treatment, training, the multidisciplinary teamwork we've talked about, strength-based models, that's how treatment courts are successful. But also, as I had just shared, including the voice of treatment court graduates and participants is vital. I cannot emphasize this enough. Peers are valuable to the recovery process and the development of programming. As we think about innovation and the future of treatment courts across the state, let's consider how we can become more responsive by including the voice of participants into the development and advancement of our programs. And treatment courts are most successful when fully collaborating with partners across the community. Darcy talked about that, and I saw a couple of those questions come up in the chat. So I'll ask you, if you run a recovery center, a support group, faith-based service, or a treatment program, maybe you work in workforce or education, are you familiar with your local treatment court? And if not, I encourage you to get connected, and we can help you with that. Find out where they're located, connect with their case manager, and see how you can collaborate with your local treatment court. Maine Recovery is strong because we're connected and we're working on response efforts together. Again, treatment courts are more than just an alternative. They unite public health and public safety, they meet accountability with compassion, and they ensure evidence-based treatment and recovery solutions instead of incarceration. They transform courtrooms into places of hope and healing, and they uphold the values of every person. But don't just take it from me. Our next speaker, Katie, is a 2020 graduate from Penobscot County Treatment Court. Katie's story is the most important story you'll hear today. It's a story of experience, of transformation, and of growth. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Katie.
Thank you so much, Abby. It is an honor to be asked to be here today. As Abby stated, I am Katie Mckay. I'm a woman in long-term recovery, and on August 5th, 2020, I graduated Penobscot County Adult Drug Treatment Court after 19 months. I'm a person who has struggled with addiction since the age of 11. When I was young, I didn't think that I had a problem, but as I got older, my life began spiraling out of control. I was watching it all unfold before me, and I couldn't do anything to stop it, and addiction had a firm grip. In May of 2018, I was arrested for the first time. My charge was unlawful manufacturing of methamphetamine, a Class B felony. I begged and manipulated my father to bail me out, which he did 4 days later. This wasn't enough to stop me from using. At this point, I'd lost my children, my home, my car. I'd overdosed numerous times. I'd lost all respect for myself. Everything revolved around substances. I just kept going in the same cycle, and as I look back at it, it's the true definition of insanity. Between May of 2018 and January of 2019, I was arrested 3 more times. On January 9th, 2019, the day of my induction, I stood in front of the entire drug court team, other participants, and Judge Bud. I was more scared than I'd ever been in my entire life. My lawyer and several others had talked to me about what drug court meant, the contract I signed, and the responsibilities that it entailed, but I was still clueless. The only thing I knew is that I didn't want to live the way I'd been living any longer. After induction, I started an intensive outpatient program, which was 3 days a week for 3 hours at a time. I would go to court 2 days a week, had a curfew for the first time in my life, needed to attend a 12-step meeting, and had to stay clean. How in the world was I going to do any of this? I tried so very hard to do things my own way, break any and every rule I could, and it didn't work out for me. I broke my curfew, I was bail checked, I wasn't where I stated I was, and my actions put me in jail for several days. This is called a sanction. That was the longest I'd ever been incarcerated. They were trying to send a message to me. It was received. When I started drug court, I thought of everyone on the team as my enemy, when at the end of the day, they only wanted what was best for me and to see me succeed. They saw the potential in me that I could not see in myself. I slowly started to get the hang of things, even though it may have taken me a solid 5 months before I was able to move on from phase 1, but I did it. I just kept trying to do the next right thing, and there was days where the only thing I could accomplish was staying clean. On the days I was struggling hard, I would sit at my case manager's office the entire day because I knew if I left, I was going to get high. She told me that was okay. I could sit there as long as I needed, and she'd much rather have me where I was safe. After 7 months, I completed IOP and moved on to a program called MRT, which is to change the criminal way of thinking that I had done for much of my life, and to actually own some of the chaos I had created. In phase 3, I was encouraged to get a job, which I did. After starting that job, I got my first apartment, my own apartment, on my own, all by myself, with the team's approval. Officer Blanchard, who works with the drug court team, was always stopping by to check in. This was the most uncomfortable part in the very beginning, because in my head, he was just trying to catch me doing something I shouldn't have been doing. But in the end, he really just wanted to show compassion and understanding. I can really thank him for changing the way that I think about law enforcement. The day that really made the largest impact on me was Christmas Eve of 2019, the anniversary of my mom's passing. Officer Blanchard took the time to stop at my house and check in just to give me some added support. At 9 months clean, Hannah, my case manager, and I were talking about how I wanted to see my children. I was scared to take that step for the fear of them not wanting to see me. Hannah encouraged me, explained to me how to fill out the paperwork, and begin reunification with my oldest. 2 weeks after filling the documents out, I received a letter from my brother and sister-in-law stating they were ready to begin the process and suggested we start immediately. The first place I went was Hannah's office, where Officer Blanchard happened to be, and they shared in the excitement with me. Zachary moved home not long after. I celebrated 1 year clean. In June of 2020, I was offered a position with Eastern Maine Development Corporation as a peer connector, a person with lived experience of opioid use disorder. I never thought I could have a job like this with a criminal history, but they gave me the chance, and the team was so encouraging and telling me that I could do it. 1 month before graduation in July, I was able to begin seeing my daughter. Her dad allowed her to come home for visits and encouraged me to repair our relationship. He was proud of me and the changes that I was making in my life. The first person I called, again, was Hannah, and we cried together. She sent out an email to the team, and they all said I'd worked hard to get where I was. I deserved it, and they were proud of me too. Today, 7 months after graduation, I continue to attend court sessions when my schedule allows. I talk to Hannah nearly every day. I am so grateful for every single person on the team, always holding me accountable, standing beside me when I couldn't stand alone, and calling me out when I was acting up. I could never thank them enough for everything they've taught me, letting me have my meltdowns, even though sometimes it wasn't necessary, and then encouraging me to keep moving forward. Drug court is truly a remarkable program and changes so many lives and help people to create lives they never dreamed of having. Today, I get to be a mom. Both of my children are home full time. I'm a partner. I'm a workforce development specialist at Eastern Maine Development Corporation. I assist others who are in recovery to try to find their own career paths. I'm a daughter, a granddaughter, a niece, and for once, a positive, productive member of society. I have an apartment, a puppy, because I'm actually stable enough to not move 17 times in a year, a landlord who tells me she loves me. I just bought a new car all on my own, and my probation was terminated 4 months early as of yesterday because I'm doing so well and continuing to move forward. My life didn't have to be this way, and my assumption is it wouldn't be without the support of the entire team, including the prosecutors, lawyers, judge, treatment staff, police officer, case manager, and probation, but it is. I used to say that drug court saved my life, but in all reality, they gave me the tools to build a foundation to save it myself. For this, I am always grateful for them giving this addict the chance to change her life.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
It is 12:27, so I'm going to ask Roland or Gordon if they want to tell us whether to move into the Q&A or if we've reached our time limit.
Well, I don't know how to answer that, Richard. It's difficult to follow Abby and Katie, of course, and thank you. I think that because we record and post all the questions and answers on the AdCare website, that we can proceed without questions and answers. I had a couple announcements to make. I just want to thank everybody, that's the whole panel, and Richard, you for putting it together, Judge Budd. Judge Budd didn't start in Maine, but he was smart enough to marry a Mainer, and we're so fortunate to have him here. Darcy, Abby, Katie, just a great presentation. The only announcement I want, well, and Richard may have said this earlier, but I can say that in the governor's opioid response plan, that we very strongly support the recovery, the treatment and recovery courts, and have, working with the judicial department, have every intent to expand them into areas that don't have a court presently. And that's a high priority for us. And we're going to work hard on that. I want to make just a comment on the upcoming summit on July 15th. The governor and I have talked, and not surprisingly, with still over 400 cases today, she's not going to be comfortable bringing 1,000 or 1,500 people into an auditorium, all of which have been stolen for us from max vaccination sites anyway. So we're going to have another virtual summit, but it is going to be a bit of a hybrid, if I dare to use that term, because we're going to ask small groups to gather in all of our 13 recovery centers and function as kind of breakout sessions. So it will be all the content. We've got some terrific speakers from the Biden administration who are setting policy in this country, and some other great speakers that we'll announce between now and July. But I hope you'll set aside the day and make efforts to be at your local recovery center, or you can absolutely participate from home. But we've had two very successful annual summits, and I have no doubt that we'll have a third. So that, I just want to thank the panel. Roland will correct me if there's any other business we need to do.
Hey, Gordon. Nope. That's it. Thank you all for being here today, to all the panelists and to all of those in the audience. This is going to be the last opioid response seminar that I'm a part of, so I'm happy to fall off with this. So thank you all so much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you, Abby and Katie particularly.